Thanks for joining us for this look at the best original reporting from KPBS News this week. I'm Matt Hoffman. Coming up, the value of funding the arts. We're going inside of a local classroom to see how kids are benefiting from a big decision by voters. Remembering those we've lost. See how Hillcrest celebrated Día de los Muertos this week. And scientists are giving KPBS a glimpse of the vibrant ecosystem just off our coast and what keeps it thriving. We've seen some mixed results in San Diego's efforts to address climate change. Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says cars continue to be our city's biggest source of pollution.
It would be great if there's a little bit more protection from these cars that are going really fast.
I'm walking with Corina Contreras on the main pedestrian route to the Grantville trolley station. Contreras is a policy advocate for the nonprofit Climate Action Campaign. The trolley could be a major asset to the community of Grantville, but the journey to get there isn't easy or pleasant. It's a long and indirect walk, there's no shade, and it's right next to the deafening I-8 freeway.
Yeah, noise is one of those things that can really destroy your peace of mind.
Grantville is a neighborhood that is rapidly densifying with new apartment buildings. Given how inaccessible the trolley is, it's not hard to understand why most of the new residents are dependent on their cars. And that translates to more traffic and greenhouse gas emissions.
We could be making tremendous advances in renewable energy and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions from that sector. But if everybody is forced to drive because transit stations like this aren't well connected to the neighborhoods around it, of course our GHG emissions are going to keep going up.
In fact, San Diego has been making big progress on renewable energy. Emissions from electricity fell by an impressive 27% in 2021, the most recent year with available data. But 2021 also saw more cars on the road as COVID restrictions eased, and that effectively canceled out the year's progress on renewable energy. Those findings were buried in the appendices of a climate monitoring report the city quietly released in March.
It does need to trend downward. It has to, but policies don't manifest immediately.
Alyssa Muto is San Diego's Director of Sustainability and Mobility. She says many of the city's climate policies, like allowing more dense housing in neighborhoods that are already less car dependent, will take years to translate to lower emissions. And she says the year-to-year fluctuations aren't as important as the long-term trend toward the city's goal of net zero emissions by 2035.
We really changed that perspective of we're getting to net zero, so it doesn't matter the baseline of where we start. We just know we need to get to this zero number.
One of the latest efforts the city is taking to reduce emissions from transportation is the Mobility Master Plan. Muto says the city analyzed a host of data sources to identify projects and policies that will increase mobility while reducing emissions.
We were able to identify a list of over 200 projects that if the city invests in those more near term will help to move us to provide more options that are safe and sustainable for our residents and visitors and businesses alike.
But something the city's Mobility Master Plan doesn't do is identify projects that will increase emissions. And there's one such project in Grantville. I'm here on Fairmount Avenue in Grantville. This road is the gateway to the neighborhood, and as you can see, it's pretty much always congested. The city traffic engineers are responding with a plan to widen the roads in this area to accommodate more cars. That'll cost taxpayers about $40 million. But get this, by the city's own estimates, best case scenario, it'll save drivers about 22 seconds.
When we commit to a multimodal type of transportation system, we are enhancing street level safety. And that's what people want.
Corina Contreras is unimpressed by the city's Mobility Master Plan. She says it's good the city is paying attention to equity and trying to improve mobility infrastructure in low-income communities first. But the city still doesn't have a detailed plan for how to fully decarbonize its transportation system. And time is running out.
Every year that you're not advancing towards achieving those goals, you are falling further and further behind, right? All of a sudden, you have this A+ vision and you're kind of operating at a D- level.
Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Now we have a unique view of the vibrant environment just off our coast. Eric Anderson shows us how Scripps researchers are trying to unlock the ocean dynamics that make it all possible.
The crew aboard the research vessel Beister spent a week dragging sensitive machinery through the water around a submerged La Jolla Canyon. They're hoping to understand the complex processes that feed the rich ecosystem under the surface. Engineer Sarah Goheen says the team uses a winch system to raise and lower a CTD device, which measures conductivity, temperature, and depth. The team is tracking dye released near the canyon several days before.
So we're just yo-yoing nonstop with that, driving transects of the canyon back and forth to see if we can see the dye that we released on Tuesday, which is letting us measure basically how the seafloor here is shaping what the water does when it's hitting there and how energy is dissipating or how energy is building up more, and basically just what the canyon does to the area.
The 4-foot-long tube resembles a model rocket. It can be raised and lowered quickly through the different ocean layers, giving researchers a snapshot of the water column from the surface to the ocean floor.
This is the crash guard, and so this is actually going to be removed when we are deploying it. So this is just for on deck, because they are crazy delicate and you can break them by looking at them.
There's another tool that does roughly the same thing, but much slower. Instead of pulling and dropping the device as quickly as possible, it is designed to take its time.
It falls at 0.5 meters a second. It's got these umbrella wings that actually open up in the water column so that it has a nice steady descent rate and it free falls. And we need it to free fall nice and slow so that the sensors on the tip of it, which we have two different ones, one for shear and one for micro temperature, so that those can go down through the water column almost like a phonograph needle.
And the information it gathers helps researchers understand the different layers of the ocean and how turbulence affects them. The warmer water near the surface is separated from deeper, colder water by the thermocline. That's an active barrier between warm and cold, and it's also where the dye has persisted for nearly a week. Researchers added audio snapshots of the water column thanks to an acoustic device strapped to the side of the ship.
We can't use lasers, things that use light in water, because as you know, probably by looking into the ocean, can't see very, very far down. So light attenuates very, very quickly in water, but sound can propagate a lot further.
Postdoctoral researcher Liz Widener says the acoustic signals are sent to the bottom of the ocean every few minutes. The return echo helps fill in the gaps that the larger instruments miss.
We can also track the position of the thermocline, so we can track it with very high resolution. We're probably having, one acoustic profile every maybe 1 to 5 meters, which is much higher resolution than where, the CTD that we're dropping and bringing back up, that's maybe every 100 meters.
And for a solid week, the vessel spent every day with instruments in the water tracking the dye in the constantly moving ocean. Researcher Matthew Alford hopes that data will help explain the underwater turbulence.
This information is providing us with fundamental fluid mechanics about how the ocean works that is super climate relevant.
Oceanographers think the underwater turbulence brings nutrients from the deeper waters to the warmer surface layer of the ocean. That feeds all manner of plant and animal life, contributing to the vibrant undersea environment.
Simulations like this have been done for years, but for this one, I really like to see the structures in the dye, and you can just see how incredibly complicated the turbulent structures are.
Alford compares the underwater waves to the ones surfers might see on the surface. The tidal and wind-driven ocean forces hitting the slope of the canyon fuel the water's movement. The resulting patterns are complex but predictable.
This dye begins at the boundary, but very quickly, due to convergences in this process, gets shot out into the interior here. And this three-dimensional aspect of the turbulence is not captured in the models that we have right now.
In the week-long experiment, the dye released in the ocean teaches researchers about the underwater waves, and understanding the vigorous and complex turbulence that feeds life near the canyon is a small step toward understanding larger ocean processes that can affect things like climate.
Climate models have grid cells. They divide the whole ocean into grid cells, and the smallest grid cell of a state-of-the-art climate model is San Diego County-sized. And so everything that happens in La Jolla Canyon is not represented properly in climate models, and we have to teach them how to represent that in what's called parameterizations.
Better climate models will lead to better understanding of the changes that are coming as the oceans warm with the rest of the planet. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The story we had earlier from Andrew Bowen was one of our most popular over at kpbs.org this week. Here's some others. A national report says San Diego is the most expensive city in the U.S. Escondido takes a step forward in transit-oriented development, and a giant pumpkin from North County is headed to bear cubs in Ramona. We'll have that story coming up for you later in the show. This week we saw all sorts of Dia de los Muertos celebrations. That includes one in the heart of San Diego's LGBTQ community. KPBS reporter Katie Hyson has this story from Hillcrest.
Beneath the towering pride flag wave brightly colored papel picados. Candles flicker around framed photos of loved ones who have died. And their favorite treats, hot tamales, concha, fireball whiskey, and a lone cigarette. At the center, a pair of work gloves worn black with use. Tucked among the frames are icons of the gay community: Leslie Jordan, Betty White, Marsha P. Johnson, and Mexican singer Juan Gabriel, whose song plays as traffic passes. A woman crowned in flowers sits guard.
Last year, folks that didn't understand the ofrenda ended up destroying it.
Carla Quezada Torres says she is one of a dozen volunteers who have been guarding the ofrenda all day and night to make sure it doesn't get vandalized again. She says the community ofrenda gives people a chance to grieve together.
Sometimes that takes a lot more strength and courage and an opportunity to embrace each other during a moment of pain.
Many of the faces in this ofrenda are noticeably young. Quezada Torres says that reflects death by suicide, homicide, and AIDS among the LGBTQ+ community. But more than grieving, she says, they celebrate their lives. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
This year, KPBS is hosting a digital community ofrenda. We invited KPBS viewers, listeners, and readers to share their memories of loved ones who have passed away. You can find it online at kpbs.org/Day of the Dead. It's been nearly a year since California voters passed a measure to guarantee arts and music funding in public schools. KPBS education reporter MG Perez shows us how that investment is playing out locally.
Be art smart.
Be art smart. This mantra is the message students receive every time they meet for Miss Monty's dance and theater class at Webster Elementary, where there is plenty of bouncing and dancing and learning going on.
The first thing you see a baby do before they even walk is bounce.
Miss Monty is Monica Harris, a veteran dancer, theater producer, teacher, and performing artist with San Diego Unified's Visual and Performing Arts program known as VAPA. 8-year-old Jade Robles has found her groove.
I like dancing because it gets me really exercised. And then every day I dance, it gets me more excited.
Harris went from a VAPA substitute to regular teacher in 2019 with sporadic visits to classrooms. Now she is poised to teach more than 700 students at 3 different campuses this school year. Like other VAPA teachers, her schedule in each classroom is going from once a month to once a week in some cases, thanks to the voters of California, who overwhelmingly approved Proposition 28 last November, guaranteeing arts education funding for every public school district in the state. Monica Harris takes that as a vote of confidence for her talent and teaching.
What they said to me and to us as an artistic community is, we want legacy. What you have, we want you to pass this to our children so that the legacy of the arts, music, dance, theater, painting, film, all of these things gets passed on to our children, so we have another generation of artists.
When you mix yellow and blue, you get green.
At Encanto Elementary, Prop 28 money is making visual art more accessible to students more often and with more resources.
They need to learn how to navigate all of the visual elements that our world throws at them continuously.
Heather Gaunt was a language arts teacher for 15 years, but painting is her passion, so she transitioned to the VAPA program, which now has funding for new iPads, so every student can create visual art with a digital paintbrush that can lead to artwork you hang on the wall, cultivating a natural tendency to be creative.
I think early on, if it's not fostered and allowed to have a space within which to just experiment and not have a right and wrong, then it can be squelched because people are nervous that I'm doing right or wrong with art.
Before Prop 28, Gaunt was teaching just one art session per classroom every 5 weeks at Encanto. Eventually, these students will have art class every week.
Be safe. Be kind.
There's a visual arts vibe at school now that 7-year-old Isabella Tellez is enjoying, drawing with her new iPad.
I love snowmen because it never snows in California, so I'd like to make some snowmen out of some stuff.
Are you an artist, Isabella?
Yeah, I like to do like some art and some crafts at home.
The expected $1 billion allocated each year in the state budget by Prop 28 is guaranteed and cannot be used for anything but arts education. There is also the benefit of well-being for students. Russ Sperling is the director of San Diego Unified's VAPA program.
The arts do a lot for mental health, do a lot for well-being. They center us. They give students that opportunity to connect in different ways.
In Miss Mani's class, the dancing has turned into acting. And with every improvisation or line delivered in character, there is also hope that an infusion of arts will lead to brighter futures with many more possibilities, as little Jade Robles told us.
It's just really fun for me, and I get entertained.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Probably a police officer.
Why? Tell me.
So I can save the world.
Bravo. MG Perez, KPBS News.
A recent study suggests that arts and culture organizations benefit our local economy by more than $1 billion each year. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Nguyen looks at one Carlsbad arts organization and its impact on the surrounding business community.
Up and down Carlsbad Village, there are shops and eateries everywhere. In the middle of that is New Village Arts, a mid-sized theater company that attracts more than 30,000 people each year.
New Village Arts itself provides $2.6 million of economic impact to North County, San Diego every year.
Christiane Kerner is the founder and executive director of the 22-year-old company. She says the Arts and Economic Prosperity Report proves that having a healthy arts scene benefits the community.
By having an arts organization in a community like Carlsbad, you are actually, rising the tide for all of the other businesses and restaurants and shops and everyone around you, not just financially, but then you are also feeding the soul of your community.
New Village Arts is surrounded by restaurants and shops, and every time there's a show, those shops say they see an increase in business.
Pure Project is located right across the street from New Village Arts.
We love supporting them and they love supporting us.
Events supervisor Kylie Volk says she definitely notices an increase in customers every time there's a show.
When the shows are on Fridays and Saturdays and even those matinee shows and Sunday mornings, people go do their brunch, they get their New Village Arts on, and then they'll come over to us and swing by for a beer. So we definitely see more foot traffic.
One of the things that this study has pointed out is that people who come to attend a show tend to spend an average of $40 or $50 more per person outside of the cost of the tickets.
I'm sure they're good. Put them on the sideboard.
Kerner thinks it's vital that this year's report included the economic impact of BIPOC organizations. 70% of New Village Arts staff identify as BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color.
We can make the argument of why it's so important from a cultural standpoint, but when you can also show that it's just as financially important, I think that is so important to our community and to the health of our community.
Showing that arts can not only feed the soul, it can also fill our bellies. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Movies are another art form that leave a lasting impact, and that's evident in a new exhibit by the La Jolla Historical Society. Arts reporter Beth Accomando has this look back on the Unicorn Cinema, which is still fondly remembered more than 40 years since it closed its doors.
Sometimes it's not just the movies we see, but where we see them that makes an impact on us.
Going to the Unicorn was always a treat. I think it was something like 50 or 60 seats. It was quite small. And once settled in, all eyes would be on the small screen at the end of the hall, and the flickers would come on.
John Ripa was a teenager going to the Unicorn Cinema and its adjacent Mithras bookstore in the 1970s. The La Jolla Historical Society celebrates both venues in an exhibit curated by Carol Olton.
I'm sitting in the Unicorn Cinema chair, a piece of memorabilia in our exhibition, Tigers, Unicorns, and Puppy Dog Tales. Everybody remembers that you had to enter the Unicorn Cinema by going through the bookstore first, which was its own kind of experience. It was a typical kind of bohemian atmosphere.
Both venues opened in 1964 and closed in 1982.
I really cried in print because it was a very sad time for anybody who really loved film and movies.
I was the last employee of Mithras Books Unicorn Cinema. So I turned the key on the final night, which was kind of a sad situation. We had a few people gathered around right after the midnight show. And it was a wonderful couple of years experience. That's where I was really first exposed to the samurai cinema.
It was a place that you saw French New Wave, you saw German New Wave, you saw stuff from the National Film Board of Canada.
I'm Jim Call, and the Unicorn Theater is where I learned to love foreign film. Some of the movies got out after the buses ran, so there were two things that I wanted to do after the buses ran, and that was the midnight movies at the Academy and the Unicorn Theater. So I bought a motorcycle expressly to come to the Unicorn.
I'm Jackie Estrada. The thing I remember that just pops in my head when you say Unicorn Cinema was seeing Busby Berkeley movies and coming out of the theater and just doing kicks as we were walking to our car and dancing like we were in a Busby Berkeley movie. We were members. You got a membership card. It would punch it each time you went, and then you got your 10th movie free.
Now, the most famous thing was the marathon.
I can remember in the middle of the night, Lawrence of Arabia came on, and just kept nodding off and opened my eyes at sand. You just get a photo ID admission thing that you would wear so you could come and go. You'd go home, take a nap, come back, etc.
Well, I'm Benjamin Darling. I'm the son of Harold Darling, the founder of the Unicorn Cinema. You know, the Unicorn was my babysitter because if my parents were busy, they would stick me in Yojimbo or Shoot the Piano Player.
His stepmother Sandra designed the cinema's brochures that now cover the exhibit walls.
The Unicorn Cinema had these really amazing brochures and programs. They became quite collector's items, and I picked out a number of these because they're all round.
Why a circle? Like, that's a crazy thing to do. They just would do anything. That's one of the things I really loved about seeing that show is the sense of creative freedom. They just did any old crazy thing that came to their mind, which I love.
Even the bookstore floor was an act of creativity.
They didn't have any money, so they threw a bunch of old paper ephemera on the floor and lacquered it. And so it was this insane collage.
I remember sitting on that floor, exploring the collage, and then watching glorious foreign films long before I was able to appreciate them. But the Unicorn's passion for cinema contributed to my lifelong love of movies. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
We wrap up this newscast with one of our most popular stories this week. It's about one family's mission to have their pumpkin rise above the rest. Jacob Ayer tells us about the Great Pumpkin of Escondido and its furry beneficiaries.
In Kristen and Jason Bush's Escondido backyard, their family set out to grow monster pumpkins a few years ago.
This is our COVID hobby that we started with some neighbors. We all said, hey, let's work in our yards and let's see how big of a pumpkin we can grow.
They hadn't found much success until this year.
Third time's the charm. We got this 465-pounder. Pretty proud of it.
Jason is an engineer and made a device to keep it in place, but moving it isn't easy. The largest of the 2 Atlantic giant pumpkins they grew takes at least 2 people to lift and a dolly to move around. Because of its size, the Bushes thought it should have a greater purpose, like being food for animals. But they had some trouble finding a taker until the spookiest holiday of the year.
We're really looking forward to sharing this with possibly the San Diego Humane Society.
It's going to be donated to 2 bear cubs this Sunday at San Diego Humane Society's Ramona Wildlife Center.
We always do our best to provide natural enrichment to all of our animals. The bear cubs in particular, it's really good to give them enrichment that they can eat or tear apart. So a 460-pound pumpkin is actually going to be amazing to be able to provide to them.
Angela Hernandez-Cusick is the wildlife rehabilitation supervisor with the organization. She says that pumpkin donations are welcome from anyone in the community, as long as they're not carved or treated with pesticides.
We'll provide those pumpkins to the wildlife. We carve them out, we give it to them whole, we give it to pretty much all of our species.
Despite all the difficulty just to grow and move the supersized gourds, Bush and her family plan to do it all again next year, with even bigger goals in mind for next Halloween. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
You can stream KPBS content anytime on our YouTube page, and that's also where we live stream KPBS Evening Edition weeknights at 5 p.m. We hope you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Matt Hoffman. Thanks so much for joining us.